Hey there, welcome to your weekly astrology forecast for the week of April 20th. My name is Shauna McGrath. I'm an astrologer and a counselor, and I'm excited to share the astrology of this week with you. The aspects that we'll talk about this week are involving the Sun and Saturn and Uranus. We also have a new moon in Taurus. And then we'll also speak about what Mercury is doing. Mercury is making some aspects with Pluto and Jupiter. So before we start, I just want you to take a moment to notice how you're feeling. Maybe take a few deep breaths. A part of the way that astrology works is everything that I'm talking about. These are all symbols. Astrology works in a symbolic language, a language of archetypes, you may say as well. And so as I'm describing all of these different aspects and the symbols that they could bring, I want you to think about what's going on in your life now and what comes up for you, what you think of as I'm speaking about these. So let's do it. So on Monday, we have the Sun square Saturn. So the Sun is freshly in Taurus, and this means that it's going to be making a square to Saturn. Saturn is at 1 degree of Aquarius, Sun at 1 degree of Taurus. These are both fixed signs. So the other part of this is that the Sun will also be moving towards contact with Uranus, or conjunction with Uranus. But before we talk about that, when we see Sun square Saturn, it is a symbol of will and ego and identity, the Sun coming into contact with a planet that is about responsibility, devotion, and putting in effort towards something that is important, towards something that is solid and predictable. There's a consistency when we think about Sun Saturn. Now, this can be challenging as well because it can show where a person feels like there is too much responsibility, too much to do. Things can feel hopeless, or like there's just not a lot of options. Saturn is an energy that constricts and limits so that a strong foundation can be built. But if you don't feel like you have a lot of options right now, that can be experienced as restriction and just limitation. So especially if you are having a Saturn transit right now, I think that's going to come up for you when the Sun is basically putting little exclamation point around Saturn issues. So especially if you're in the middle of your Saturn return, this will be something that you want to pay attention to. And so what I tell people that have Sun Saturn either transit or in their birth chart is it helps to have a very clear and specific idea of what it means to be successful to you. So that could be, what does it mean to you to be successful this week, this month, like in general in life. You could take it as existential as you like. But I would say this week, especially if you're watching this the weekend before, it can be helpful to set out a plan for yourself for the week of things that you want to do, that you want to accomplish. The other piece of this is when we have Sun Saturn, it is also helpful for you to measure your success or your feelings of accomplishments based on actions that you take. So what I mean by this is if you want to make a good impression on someone by doing a certain project, like let's say you're doing a work project or an art project, if you base your level of success on how much someone else likes that, that can be really difficult because you have no control over what someone thinks, what they feel. Rather, the more helpful way to approach this is to say, okay, I'm going to spend X amount of hours on this project. I'm going to work on this project so that it results in this kind of effect within this project, or I'm going to work on this in a way that I feel good, that feels good to me. So I think this is really important. I'm spending a lot of time on this because Sun Saturn, it can really bring a lot of strength and initiative and even innovation at times, but it can feel like, especially I think a lot of us right now are feeling limited. There is a limitation on resources and on our ability to take action. And so I feel that it's possible that the Sun-Saturn aspect this week could exacerbate that. And so what I want for you is to feel like you have the most control over your situation, because when we feel as though we have more control and autonomy, then we can actually be more creative and we can actually feel more free because of that inner power, that inner resilience is there. So let's see, what else do I want to say about that? Yeah, so I would say, especially if you're watching this the weekend before or earlier in the week, set some tangible goals for yourself this week based on what you can do and what you want. So your own personal volition is going to lead this. And again, like, this is all very Sun stuff. Sun is about the will, it's about initiative, it's like that solar plexus energy, it's about having a sense of moving forward from your own desire. So the other piece of this, of course, is that Uranus is at, 6 degrees of Taurus. So this means that the Sun is also slowly moving towards a conjunction with Uranus. And Sun-Uranus is very different than Sun-Saturn. Sun-Uranus is about innovation, it's about breaking free, it's about changing a structure, changing being Uranus, and then structure being Saturn. So it's kind of interesting that we're working with these two very different energies this week. So I think that the other part of this too is that we have our new moon happening in this part as well. So, and I'll speak more about that in a moment, but I think that there is a desire to change this week. There is a desire to innovate. The trick for you, I feel, is going to be working with the Saturn energy. So whatever it is that you're thinking about changing or where you want to change, I do feel that you would benefit from incorporating that practical Saturn side. What is it that you need to do over the long term in order to be where you want to be? This is about, the way I see this also, since it's a new moon point, this is about having the idea and having the inspiration. It's not necessarily about doing things to make everything the way that you want it right now. Like, right now is really about getting that spark of inspiration. So let's see, new moon is happening on Wednesday, the 22nd. So actually might be Wednesday or Thursday, depending on where you are in the world. In Australia, I think yours lands on Thursday, the 23rd. So it's exact Pacific time, 7:25 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesday, the 22nd. And it's at 3 degrees and some change, so 4 degrees if you're rounding up, in Taurus. So what does that mean? So new moon is always this time of going within, of reflecting, of introverting and feeling into what it is that's most true for you at this period in time. It's more of a quiet time. It's more of a reflective time. So I would use this, especially Monday, Tuesday, into Wednesday, leading up to it. It's really good to have that more internal and reflective and quiet time. And I think that it's also important to look at where Taurus is in your birth chart. I put my online classes on hold just for a little bit so that I can see more clients. But I know that a lot of you got a lot of benefit from the classes that I did, where we look at where the new moon is falling in your birth chart. So I think that can be really interesting to look up if you're familiar with your birth chart and you're so inclined. But regardless, this new moon is still moving into this same area that we've been talking about this whole entire time, where we have the sun square Saturn, which is about building a solid foundation, putting the work in, putting the, not even work, but Saturn, I think also, like, it has this devotional feeling to it. Like there's something that you're dedicated to, that you love, that you go to again and again and again. And the more that you do this, the stronger this thing becomes, whatever it is that you're repeating. And it can also bring like such a sense of confidence as well. So the moon is, the new moon, this lunar cycle is really tapping into this energy around innovation and building something new. So the other part of this is that we have Mercury making some aspects that I think are really interesting. Mercury is in Aries, and it's going to be squaring both Jupiter and Pluto. So Jupiter and Pluto had their conjunction a couple weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. So Mercury making this square is going to be essentially squaring both of them because they're both still very close together in the sign of Capricorn. And so Mercury is the mind, it's communication. It's also the sense of the trickster or playfulness. Can also be seen as a symbol of things not being as they seem, but it's all around communication. Language, symbol is also associated with Mercury because language is really just a symbol for what it is that we are meaning to convey. So I want you to think about that when we're talking about this aspect. It's not just literal communication, it's also like understanding and symbol and language. So Mercury will be square Jupiter and Pluto. What does that mean? Jupiter is a planet that's about expansion, it's about inclusion, growth. Pluto is about the unconscious mind. It's about shadow work. It's about looking at the things that are uncomfortable to look at. And when I see Mercury Jupiter, I see a desire for big ideas, for big philosophical communication. Mercury is in the sign of Aries, so it's kind of like a contradictory symbol here. So I think there's going to be a lot of excitement around big ideas, around philosophical thinking. But then Pluto requires depth. Pluto requires substance. And so this to me is where there's an intensity to communication. There's a desire to maybe talk a lot or to communicate a lot, or there's a lot of big ideas that are happening and there's a lot of substance. There's a need to go deeper into things. And so that may be, this can go a variety of different ways. It may be things that you're feeling, ideas that you're having. Again, this is a time of really beneficial time around reflection and thinking about what it is that you want for yourself. What are you building for yourself? Especially if you are having a Saturn aspect right now, like I talked about, or Uranus aspect in your transits. This is a good time to really think about what it is that you want and what's important to you, and what brings you a sense of feeling, substance of, I see Mercury Pluto is also having this sense of like comfort within like going really deep into conversation, and that things don't need to stay surface, that we can actually talk about things that are meaningful. The thing I'll say too with this Mercury Pluto, Mercury Jupiter, is that it can symbolize obsessive thinking also, where you're like fixated on something. So I would just watch out for that. I think that's more likely if you already have a tendency towards In psychology, they would call it rumination, where you're going over the same topic over and over again. And that can be helpful, especially if you're doing it in a therapeutic setting, or journaling even. But I want you to notice if you're circling the same agitation over and over again, and if it, does it feel therapeutic, or does it feel like you're just kind of on a mental hamster wheel? So that is that. All right, so I have some tips for you. Oh, I do also want to note that the nodes have changed signs. So this is important because it happens only about every 18 months or so, and it's associated with our eclipse cycle. So the nodes, N-O-D-E-S, have changed from Leo and Aquarius to Cancer, Capricorn. So North Node is in Cancer for the next 18 months-ish, and then South Node is in Capricorn for the next 18 months-ish. And I'll talk about those a lot more when we get towards eclipse season this summer. But this is, it is a change, and it's something to notice for. I think that people are not really going to, this isn't going to be like a Saturn transit, but it is a shift in focus around things that feel like there's a calling or a compulsion. The nodes, I also see them as like where there's a hunger for something. If you're interested in the nodes, looking at those more, you can look at where you have your personal placement in your birth chart, and that can be really interesting to look at. Okay, so tips for you this week. I'm gonna take a sip of water. Okay. Number one, seek both freedom and responsibility this week. So it feels important to have a sense of structure this week because of the Saturn, but then we also have Uranus happening too. So I want you to be open to where things are flowing, where there's innovation that is possible. So we're kind of like straddling two things that feel very different, but maybe they lead to something like a third thing that isn't either, it's not like you have to go one or the other. So I want you to kind of think about, especially knowing yourself and how you are, do you benefit from incorporating more structure, or do you benefit from working with surrender and acceptance? Where do you need to find a balance point right now? So that's number one, to seek both freedom and responsibility. Number two is to be open to creativity, be open to imagination. The new moon time is such a fabulous time for being open to new insights, and especially so when we have Uranus here. Both Mercury and Uranus are about divination and connecting with ideas that come from the collective unconscious, what Carl Jung would call it. You may call it from angels or from spirit guides, or just inspiration, whatever it is. Uranus and Mercury are both associated with this open, innovative phenomenon that can happen when we're curious. So that's number two, to be open to that creativity, to be curious about that. Number three is, I want you to work with that Mercury, Jupiter, Pluto energy. So number three is to allow your ideas to grow. And I think that this can kind of be tricky, especially if you're working with the weightiness of Saturn. Remember that you don't have to have everything figured out right now. You can have an idea and not know exactly how to move forward, and that's okay. I want you to just let those things organically grow. And we're blending in the Jupiter energy here to allow for that growth and that expansion, and that does take time. Especially also we're in the new moon point this week. So over the next month, ideas that you have during the new moon point will continue to evolve and grow and be elaborated on as you take action during the course of the month. All right, so I'm going to pull a tarot card for you. And I don't know why, but I've been really feeling compelled to use this deck. It's a different one. It's still tarot, but it's a little bit, it's called the Illuminated Tarot. I'm going to pull a card from this today. It's kind of like a blend, or it is a blend of Rider-Waite and traditional playing cards, which I think is interesting. Okay. So this card will be a meditation card for you. So it'll be kind of like asking you to contemplate a particular thing or a particular symbol over the course of this week. Oh. Sorry. Okay. Ooh. This is let's see. There we go, that's better. So before I tell you about this card, I want you just to look at it and notice what you notice, what jumps out at you, and what's the action of the card. And I want you to leave me a comment and let me know what your initial reaction is when you saw this card. So like what really jumped out at you. And I'm going to read you from the book and then I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So this is the Ace of Clubs. Ace of Clubs with this really gorgeous lion on it. So clubs is also wands. So like he's holding the wand in his teeth. So we would say Ace of Wands in the Rider-Waite. Strength, overcoming desire, building trust, and courage. So I feel like this card is tapping into the Saturn-Uranus energy that we talked about, building this sense of strength. I'm also thinking about the lion with the wand, where it's like there's a heat there, there's a fire there, there is determination. And in the Rider-Waite system, the Ace of Wands is about a new beginning, Ace, and Wands is about passion, desire, and initiation. It's about something very active starting. So, so I wonder, what is it that you've been really wanting to do, or that you really want to bring into your life? I feel like this card is asking you to contemplate that, whatever that thing is. What is it that you very much desire? Is there something new that you desire? Maybe things are changing for you, where the thing that you thought was super important and like really brought you joy and fulfillment, maybe that's changing. And so what is it that is falling away, and what is starting to come into your consciousness? Yeah, that feels like a good place to stop. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, leave me a comment. Let me know how you're doing, what's resonated with you most. If you're interested in looking at your own personal birth chart and how things are moving and what's present for you, you can let me know. Send me an email or go to my website, shaunamcgrathAstrology.com. I offer astrological readings and astrological counseling. And until next week, I'm sending you lots of love and wishing you safety and health.